Hello and welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to another StarCraft 2 cast for the LPS Last Player Standing, StarCraft 2 Open number 2. My name is Kopo, and today we're going to be watching a best of 3 between sixjaxDDE, spawning as the blue Terran up in the top left-hand corner, and RevDoctor, spawning as the teal Terran in the bottom right-hand corner. Map is GSL Crevasse. I'm sure you guys have heard of it. I'm not going to go into my big long discussion about maps anymore because I'm sure I've done that enough. Well, needless to say, I think everybody knows how this map plays by this point. So we are into the round of 32 in this tournament, so we are dealing with best of 3s now as opposed to the round of 64 best of 1 single elimination format. So now we've kind of weeded out, some of the no-shows and some of the players who weren't so committed. Now we're dealing with more of the players who are really determined to go out there and win the tournament. Obviously everybody's heard of, or for the most part I think everybody's heard of sixjaxDDE. We did cast his round of 64 game, which was a win over Ethereal, I do believe, a Protoss. We basically starved to death. I don't recall doing RevDoctor's game. I believe we may have, but I don't know if that was me or not. Either way, both these players were good enough to obviously to advance through the round of 64, and are now here doing a best of 3 against each other in TVT. TVT is a matchup that's changed actually quite a bit in the past couple of weeks. Obviously, the Koreans, Slayer's clan in particular, brought some new and exciting stuff to MLG, which has essentially switched everything in this matchup. It used to be siege tanks, and who could get siege tanks faster, and who could use their Vikings and their siege tanks more efficiently in the 45-minute games that always tended to happen. Now it seems to be still along the lines of mech, but things like Blue Flame Hellions are starting to pop up. That was the big staple of MLG for the Koreans, and fancy little things like that are switching up the metagame in ways that nobody really could have foreseen. Everybody kind of thought TVT was stuck in a bit of a rut, and Slayers came along to try and fix that. So we do see a standard time barracks dropped by RevDoctor, and I do believe that sixjaxDDE is just going for the 16 command center. I don't believe he actually has a racks, so he's actually just doing a blind command center with no barracks at all, dropping the barracks now obviously because you need one of those at some point to build marines. A simple standard marine coming out here, standard opening by RevDoctor. However, we are seeing sixjaxDDE do the blind fast expansion. No racks, no gas, fast expand. He is dropping the gas now, however, because he's going to need that at some point. Again, fast expansion on this map is quite good, as you have this nice little spot in your base. It does only have 6 mineral patches and 1 geyser, but really it's so easy to take that a lot of players are starting to do just fast expansions on this map just to get that little bit of extra economy. As we do see, RevDoctor throws down his own command center at his natural expansion. Obviously a little bit later than sixjaxDDE, who might be able to take advantage of that, but similar times for both. One just did barracks first, the other one did command center first, but both are going to be on equal footing here in a couple minutes. Just a second gas being dropped for DDE. I do believe no gas has been taken yet for RevDoctor, who's doing a gasless fast expand. We'll expect both those to be taken probably simultaneously within the next couple of seconds, as you do need gas to get really anywhere as Terran, unless you're doing some sort of a mass marine play. Second barracks going down for RevDoctor. He might be intending to put on a little bit of pressure, but I highly doubt it due to that fast expand. Neither player is really in a position right now to put on any pressure, as both decided to drop those early command centers. That's a big, huge use of 400 minerals, which are hard to come by in the early game. So if you're going to commit to that, you're going to be hard-pressed to find minerals for units in the first couple minutes of the game. Factory does go down for sixjaxDDE, who is fully saturated on 2 refineries at this point. Don't believe he's taken his 3rd yet. No, he has not. We do see any refineries. No, still no refineries for RevDoctor. He's still going all minerals all the time. He is building another command center, actually. That's quite surprising. He probably suspects or has scouted, maybe. Let's check that vision. Yeah, he scouted the fact that sixjaxDDE did a very fast command center up to his natural, so he did one in response, as well as he's also building a 3rd one to hopefully take his full natural base down here, or maybe take this little half base down here. Either way, very, very cool play by RevDoctor. We see him trying to get ahead in the economy, and we'll see how well that works for him. He does have 3 barracks. One is still under construction, but almost completed. So he is going 3 racks, mostly all marine all the time, as we do see gas now finally being taken by RevDoctor. Switch back to all view there just to make sure I don't forget to do that. He does taking gas very, very late, which means they obviously plan to do this, build this second command center from the start. We do see a small force of marines here. He didn't scout nearly pressure. Both players are mostly just turtling. sixjaxDDE using this turtle time to get some tech up, while RevDoctor simply going for the mass expand build. You see the starport's almost completed for sixjaxDDE, who will probably, actually I can't call what he's going to be building because right now he's building tanks out of his factory, so really this could be anything, and it does turn out to be a Viking. Vikings obviously give vision to the siege tanks that can shoot just a little bit farther than they can see. It's like Vikings providing that vision needed to allow them to actually shoot, take advantage of their full range, that is. So both players kind of in a lull here. We haven't seen any pressure yet so far, although we do see that this command center might come in handy. He might not actually land it at an expansion. If he just leaves it there, he could train SCVs and use mules on the mineral patches that he currently has. You see some Marines are trekking across the field, maybe can try to put on a bit of pressure, but I don't see that being very successful. He does have a bunker, and is completely walled off thanks to this destructible debris. The Marines might be able to take some shots at the debris, weaken it for a later time, but he is going to scout that there is no third base taken yet, unless it's a hidden one, but really this is quite early for a third base anyways, and RevDoctor seems to be the only one ever that I've ever seen, that decides he's going to build a command center so early. It's a very, very greedy play and could be punished by DDE. One Marine tries to sneak up the ramp there and gets promptly silenced by that bunker, but these Marines are going to pick off this destructible debris quite easily, I'd say, and this will make a huge hole in the wall off. It's unfortunate for DDE, but he doesn't really have a whole lot to defend this. Viking landed to maybe to provide a bit of additional support, but if these Marines charge up here, they're basically going to be dead. Siege mode's not quite completed yet for DDE, actually. He is still only about a third done it. Siege tank's going to push down and maybe do a bit of damage, trying to bait these Marines up the ramp, and that's not happening, nothing doing there. This command center's still back in the base, not having landed at an expansion yet. These Marines are going to realize that's a futile effort, and they're going to turn around and go home by the looks of it. Second bunker being built back here. Scan goes down on sixjaxDDE's base. Obviously, RevDoctor was unable to get any scouting, so he's going to scan just to see exactly what the choices are. He sees no add-on on the starport, which means that obviously it's Vikings or Medvacs. You might suspect that this reactor might be switched over. We do see a third command center being built for DDE, who is obviously gearing up to take a third base. We will hopefully see this orbital command lifted down at some point. 2 more barracks are in production for RevDoctor, who's obviously going mass Marine play. Again, like I said, that's something that's quite easy to do when you take your gas so late. If you take your gas late, you're obviously going to be behind in that particular resource, meaning that you have to dump your minerals somewhere and have to save up gas to get the more gas-heavy units like medvacs and stuff that are required to keep your Marines alive. Although RevDoctor does have full map control, he has moved out and has been able to secure all Zelnaga towers, I do believe, with his little Marines being very mobile, and are actually pretty easy to just throw away. I mean, having one Marine get killed at a Zelnaga tower is definitely worth it for the amount of time you might be able to hold this tower for. Just see this command center is being lifted off and landed at the expansion. We don't see that quite yet for DDE, who is basically using this as a macro orbital command. Something we've seen more often in recent games is that idea of an orbital command in the base, used simply to train additional SCVs and mules until you feel safe to successfully move out and secure an expansion. You see the mass exodus of SCVs here starting to mine from the third base, as we just see that these bases are starting to get maybe a little bit low. This one's actually not too bad. RevDoctor's done a pretty decent job of saturating both bases and making sure that none of them run out too quickly. See this command center is about to land. Both players taking a third at roughly the same time, even though RevDoctor had his orbital command up so much earlier. Supply counts are actually very, very different. With the amount of time that DDE spent doing tech, he had a hard time actually pumping out units, and supply-wise, that's allowed RevDoctor to be mainly ahead by quite a bit. But his supply is used up in things like Marines, which are easily killed by things like siege tanks. So although DDE is behind in supply, he does have what could be considered the more useful supply, arguably. I mean, if he has those tanks sieged up in proper position, he can rain down damage on those Marines and equalize the supply very quickly. So SCV is going to move in and scout the fact that the third base has been taken by RevDoctor. He's going to stem a couple units up there to take out the scout and not let it gain any additional information. Although we do see a little bit of a medvac Marine force over here that could be lifted off and into the natural. Although these Marines here to be stand guard, I hope I didn't miss an actual drop that happened. That would be highly unfortunate. I try to watch the minimap, but when they're blue and teal, it's actually sometimes a little bit hard to tell the difference. We do see medvacs being loaded up here and are looked to be in position for a drop. Sensor tower has been built by DDE for that particular purpose. There it is, kind of hiding amongst the mineral lines. That'll allow them to spot the drop coming a little bit before it actually hits. See Hellions are moving across. I don't believe Blue Flame is yet done, but it is almost completed. Should be completed about the time he actually arrives. And these Marines are going to see that, as there is a fairly large force there, but Hellions are obviously quite good against Marines, especially when they have Blue Flame, allowing them to be 8 times more efficient, or there and about, somewhere in that number. RevDoctor again is successfully out-macroing his opponent. The supply count is quite scary. Again, the supply for DDE might be a little bit more useful in terms of siege tanks versus Marines, but that's debatable. Medvacs are going to see that this sensor tower has vision all the way around here, and are going to try and skirt the edges of it, only going in at the last second, maybe trying to do a bit of a drop on the production facilities. Hellions are going to sit here. Not going to take the tower because that'd be too useful. Medvacs have now been spotted by DDE. Is he going to take any action? Hopefully he sees them and mobilizes his force accordingly. He's going to try and get back in the base and try and protect from these medvacs that are trying to swoop in. At the same time, I don't believe we've seen any action down here. No, it looks like we got missile turrets defending quite well against any sort of medvac drops that could occur. These medvacs might be forced to turn around and go back home thanks to that sensor tower. Another sensor tower has been planted at the third base. DDE using a very useful and yet very or rarely used structure by the Terran, which is a sensor tower. Most Terrans don't think to build them, but actually, even though they reveal their radius to both players, they're still an incredibly useful tool. If the player's not alert and manages to let it drop, Stewick in there, you can see it and react accordingly. Although the supplies are very different, RevDoctor is getting close to being supply capped. He's going to have to move out with this massive force of Marines and Marauders. They are only 1-0. He hasn't taken this time to get mad upgrades, although he will likely be approaching his enemy at about the time that his one armor finishes. His Hellions are going to scout. There's a bit of a force moving out here, maybe do a bit of damage to the Marines, but probably not enough to make them useful. It does manage to melt a couple of Marines. No stim yet. He's trying to bait a stim, but he's not quite doing that. This Blue Flame is actually doing quite well against the Marines. He does bait a bit of a stim. Some units sprint forward, but obviously are still unable to catch Hellions. These tanks are going to siege up and be able to rain down damage. He doesn't want to move into that tank line at all. This Marauder does manage to scout that there is a tank line set up, and hopefully he doesn't decide to move in there, and that's exactly what it looks like he decided to do with a lot of those units. He did absolutely no damage with that, and that was a very, very poor decision to engage in that situation. That basically equalizes supplies single-handedly right there by moving his units right into that line. We're going to see drops that are going to try and just make the tanks destroy themselves. Dropping one Marine and having tanks do splash damage on themselves is actually a very effective technique. This is doing a very good job of very, very nice play by RevDoctor, who did lose most of his units, but at the same time was able to kill a significant amount of siege tanks. Now we'll be able to sit back and hopefully remax an army fairly fast thanks to those barracks that he has operational. I do believe he is sitting on probably, what do we got here? 1, 2, 3, 7 barracks from what I can see in that little section. Anyways, siege tanks and Hellions moving out for DDE. A small force of Marine tanks moving out for RevDoctor. These tanks are going to be able to blast from the high ground. RevDoctor is forced to retreat. Increasingly mobile, or I shouldn't say mobile, but increasingly moving mech army here by DDE is going to get threateningly close to Doctor's third base. He has not yet taken a fourth, whereas DDE has. Securing it with the Planetary Fortress. Just a small little base, so nothing too special. And here comes a drop in from 3 medvacs, able to be cleaned up by this Hellions, who did spot it on the sensor tower's range. That did very little damage, actually, thanks to the Planetary Fortress. He did manage to get 3 kills out of that. Vikings are going to be able to chase down these medvacs and probably kill them if I was to hazard a guess. 4 Marine contingent here. We're still dealing with a bit of a situation here. Medvacs are going to come in and try and drop on the tank line again. Same situation we had before. Actually, this will do a very, very good job of killing the tanks. All the supplies are now heavily starting to go in DDE's favor. That did not do nearly enough damage, those dropping there, and this is a massive Hellion force. He'll be able to successfully roast a lot of workers and a lot of Marines, because Hellions are basically the hard counter to Marines. And there's the GG by RevDoctor. He had the very early macro lead and was able to gain an early game advantage through that, but he basically gave it away in that one engagement where he ran a whole bunch of Marines and tanks into that big tank line of DDE, which managed to turn the tide of the game. So this is game 1 of the best of 3, guys. We'll be bringing you game 2 very, very shortly. Hopefully you guys are enjoying the cast for the last player standing StarCraft 2 Open number 2, round of 32 best of 3s, and I will see you guys later.